If there were a bike that could be called the most famous and the most influential motorcycle of all time, this could be the one. This is a machine that inspired a generation. It's a bike that millions watched in awe as it flew 60 feet in the air over a fence and away from the bad guys. This is Steve McQueen's ride. This is the famous Great Escape bike, and today we're going to see it come to life and we're going to see it in action. As always, our big thank you goes out to our channel sponsors for supporting what we do, and a huge shout out goes to our Patreon members as well. In this video, we'll be getting up close and personal with the Great Escape machine. We'll meet the proud owner of the bike, we'll learn about its story, and of course we'll see the machine get started and come to life. 80 years ago this year, on the 25th of March 1944, a group of Allied soldiers attempted a daring escape from a German prisoner of war camp. Of the hundreds that attempted the escape, only 3 men actually made it to freedom. The rest were captured and many were killed, including the mastermind behind this great escape, RAF squadron leader Roger Bushell. This true life story from World War II inspired the 1963 classic film The Great Escape, which was directed by John Sturges. Although several aspects of the story were tweaked and changed to try and improve the film's commercial appeal. Elements like Americans escaping from the prison and of course the high-octane bike chases were embellishments from Hollywood. The star American, of course, was the king of cool, Steve McQueen. And legend has it, McQueen only agreed to sign up on the basis that he could show off his motorcycle skills on camera. McQueen and his motorcycle chase sequence became the most iconic moment of the movie. The daring jump over the fence was etched into the minds of motorheads the world over and influenced a whole new generation to hop on board 2 wheels and push the limits. That jump, without doubt, became the most famous movie stunt in history, meaning that the motorcycle in turn also became one of the most infamous bikes in history as well. There were 4 men involved in making this moment happen, and we'll learn all about them here today. Obviously, we have Steve McQueen, who was synonymous with this bike and this story. But we also have Ken Heens, who was a factory Triumph ISDT racer. There's Tim Gibbs, who was a skilled motocross racer and stunt rider. And finally, there's Bud Eakins, who was a Triumph dealer and a long-term friend and stunt double to Steve McQueen. Those 4 horsemen made this bike an icon. But after production on the film had wrapped, the bike that soared through the Austrian skies was put aside, forgotten about, and almost lost to history, until one determined man managed to track it down. Dick Shepherd is an avid Triumph enthusiast. He has many bikes in his collection, like this super rare Triumph Cub factory replica. He's the man that managed to find the Great Escape machine after all those years. And he's the man that meticulously and lovingly restored the machine to its former awe-inspiring glory. So I'm stood here with the machine and the proud owner, Dick Shepherd, who is one of, if not the foremost Triumph collector in the world, right? Dick, just tell us your background before we jump into talking about the bike. What's your background? Why do you love Triumph so much in particular?
Well, when I was young, I've always had motorbikes. I had my first motorbike when I was 10 years old, but I could never afford a Triumph. And obviously I've been a very successful business person, so now I've got a few quid, I decided to buy a few.
More than a few, right? How many?
We got a few, well, a few hundred.
That's what I thought.
I think what more interesting was the fact that what John Blaw's done with Triumph. I looked at this guy and I thought, this guy is definitely going to make a go of Triumph. And well, we can see today what he's achieved. And to be part of this, to have these bikes in the visiting centre is just something special, you know. And the relationship I've got with the Blaw family is second to none, you know. So it's great, and people can enjoy the bikes. You know, they're not, you know, hit up. My pet hate is these collectors that have these very rare cars and bikes and never let anybody see them or touch them. We're not like that. You come here, you can see the bikes, you can walk up, you can touch it. I know you're not supposed to, but we don't say anything. It's nice to be able to have this venue to display the bikes. It's fantastic.
So you can come and see this bike and a lot of your other bikes here at the factory visitor experience.
Don't call it a museum. I get told off for that. It's a factory visitor experience. Yeah.
So you can see this bike. Let's talk about this bike, Dick. One of the most famous bikes of all time, do we think? How did it come into your possession? What's the story?
I would say it's quite close. Well, what happened was, in 1961, Bud Eakins, who was the guy that done the actual jump,
who was a Triumph dealer, right?
He was a Triumph dealer, probably one of the biggest. He sold more bikes because he was in California, Hollywood area, you know, he sold a lot of bikes. Anyway, he came over to England in 1956, and Ken Haynes, who was a works rider and also a Triumph dealer, taught Bud how to ride on dirt. Bud was a great desert racer, but he'd never done scrambles or ridden on dirt. In 1961, Bud was doing really well in desert racing and everything. So the Triumph factory decided to give Bud an International 6-Day Trials TR6. And this is how it came about. This bike was built by Ken Haynes. Bud's bike was virtually a standard TR6, whereas Ken Haynes' 1961 bike was also a TR6, but it had been so heavily modified. It had got all trick suspension on the front, it had got external springs, the rear shocks were specials, and when Bud got the contract to do the film, he wanted this particular bike because it was a one-off bike. How the story went was, Bud wanted this particular bike for the jump, but Ken was still using it in 1962 in Garmisch-Kirchenparten, which was the international in Germany, and a lot of the actors like Steve McQueen, I think Charles Bronson as well, went and watched Bud and Ken in the International 6-Day Trials.
Because they was filming at the same time?
They was literally filming at the same time, because everyone thinks the film was 63, but they filmed it in 62 for the 63 season. Bud approached Ken and said to him, could he get this bike? And Ken said, well, look, I don't think we'll be able to, but I'll build you one exactly the same. Bud told Ken it was a British prisoner of war film, so one of Ken's dealerships was in Fleet. Literally round the corner was a British Army barracks, and he knew some of the guys there, so he went and got some camouflage paint of the era, which this is, from the British Army, and painted the bike green. Well, the Germans in the Second World War never ever painted any of their machinery green, but it was fortunate for us that he did, because Bud took two bikes, Triumphs, to the film set, and one was a solo bike, and the other one was a motorbike and sidecar. All the same registration number. Anyway, when we brought Tim Gibbs over from New Zealand, who was the original stunt rider who done the first stunt, he's the actual German that comes down the road when McQueen puts the wire off and has him off the bike. Tim Gibbs' wife was on the film set with him with a 8mm cine camera, and she's got some film which has been passed on to me of McQueen and Tim painting the other solo bike Battleship Grey with a brush. So, you know, luckily we know this was the one that done the jump, not the other solo bike.
This is the one that went airborne.
This was the actual one that went airborne. And the other thing was, the only two people that done the actual jump was Tim Gibbs, who set the speed, elevation up and everything, and then Bud done it on the morning of the jump. And Bud told me himself, that he was very nervous and was only going to do it once. Whereas Tim was just, he's like Marc Marquez today. He just had no fear whatsoever. He would have done it 20 times over, you know.
How many other bikes were there on the film?
Triumph-wise, there was 3. There was this one, and then Bud brought over from America another solo bike, and then there was a solo bike with a sidecar, but they all had the same registration number. But the other 2 were definitely painted Battleship Grey, and they went back to America. Now we think that the sidecar, I think he left the sidecar on the film set. We're pretty certain there was 2 solo bikes went back to his shop. That's where the confusion rises. They think this was one, but it wasn't, because Bud had 2. There was 3 used in the film, which we've got footage of. And then there was some DKWs. They used some bikes from Germany, DKWs. I think there was a couple of BMWs as well they used. But as I say, if you watch the film, you can see they can't keep up with Steve and Bud, you know. Because
there's a story that I've seen online about the Fonz riding one of these bikes. Is that true, or is that not real?
Load of rot. Yeah, someone mentioned that to me the other day, that the Great Escape bike Fonz rode. Yeah. No,
Fonz. It's just the same model.
No, not even the same model. Fonzie rode a TR5. Bud supplied the bikes for the Fonz series, because Bud used to supply a lot of bikes for films. And the first bike that the Fonz rode, he crashed. Yeah. I have that bike at home, and it's signed by Fonzie. Then they had a square barrel trophy that was used as a beauty shop bike, that wasn't used in the series of the filming. It was just for them to stand by or sit on. Anyway, I'd done an interview on television with the Fonz, Henry Winkler, and we took the bike along, and I said, would you like to have a ride on it? And he went, no, he said, that's the bike I fell off of. He said, what they used to do. I said, yeah, but I used to see you in the film set. He said, no, they had a wooden platform with wheels on, and they used to pull me about on the set.
Because he couldn't ride a bike, right?
Well, he did. He fell off this one, and I think it literally frightened him a bit, you know. But he never rode this. Yeah. There was a lot of rumours when we did the filming with Guy Martin. John Layton was telling people that he'd done the jump, and lots of other people done the jump. I can assure you, they never did, because that at the time was something special. You know, when you look at the distance they jumped with the bike, and they had to land it on the back wheel, because otherwise that would have just popped the suspension straight through. But this has been altered. Underneath here, this fork stanchion is what they call knurled. It's got a crisscross pattern on there, so that when you do that clamp up, it literally grips it tight and can't turn, and it stops it from pulling. Well, it doesn't stop it, but it helps it from popping the stanchion through, you know. It's like everything. Someone starts a little rumour, and then it escalates, then it escalates again. You know. But,
we've busted a couple of myths today then.
When Tim done the first stunt, as he comes down the road, he has to lay the bike down and go underneath the wire, literally. So he lays the bike down. This is the first take. The bike skids down the road, hits the cameraman, breaks his leg. So Tim thinks he's going to get the sack. So he starts to do a runner. Sturgis shouts at him, get effing back here, Gibbs. So he comes back. He says, right, get on the bike and do it again. And he shouts over to the cameraman, get another cameraman. He said, tell him to move a bit quicker next time. No mercy.
Yeah. So we've heard about the legend of this machine, and we've busted some myths as well. But how did Dick track down this machine, and how do they know that this is the real deal? Let's find out.
A lot of the facts we didn't know, like how the bike got from the German dealer where Ken had sent it on a train. It was sent by England on a train to the German dealer, and then Bud and Tim went and picked it up from the German dealer, and then the dealer came and picked the bike up and sent it back to Ken. So that filled in that little bit. And the other thing we didn't know, did they use a ramp? How did they get the elevation? Well, what happened was they found a field with a bomb hole in it. Tim Gibbs, Steve McQueen and Bud Eakins actually dug a ditch inside the bomb hole to get more elevation. Now we know this is fact because Bud told me that Sturgis, the film producer, peered over the bomb hole, and Steve McQueen said to him, I must be the highest paid ditch digger around, you know, because he was helping them dig, because he was quite a physical guy, Steve, you know.
He must have been out in the desert at home as well, doing all of that kind of stuff.
100%, yeah. A really good rider. But, as I say, the only two people that done that jump was Tim Gibbs, who set it up.
Who has signed this tank.
He signed the tank, and also Bud Ekins. Steve McQueen did not do the jump.
Do you know how many times they did do the jump that day?
Tim told me when he came over, when we brought him over from New Zealand, he told me they must have done it, I think about 4 or 5 times to get it dead right. As I say, Bud didn't. Tim was doing all of this, and then Bud just done it, I think, once that day, and that was, you know, that was it.
That was the shot. You know. The bike itself, then, is obviously made to look older than it is. This is a 1960s.
Well, when you think this bike, this is the 62 TR6, this bike wasn't even built in the Second World War, but what you've got to remember is because Bud Ekins and Steve McQueen were massive Triumph gurus and fans of the bike, they wouldn't ride a German bike. They didn't want to ride a bike. They were too heavy. And also what happened was most of the stunts were done by the three of them, Tim Gibbs, Bud Ekins and Steve McQueen, because they'd hired some stunt riders in Germany and they were too slow. They couldn't keep up with McQueen and everybody when they were riding, so they were doing all the stunts themselves.
Once the film was wrapped then and they finished doing the jump, where did the bike go? What was the history between the jump and yourself getting hold of it?
What happened was, when the film finished, the bike came back to Ken Haynes' shop, and it just sat in the shop, and it was a battered old bike. You can imagine it had been down the road a few times, and on its side, all scratched and everything. A local farmer who was interested in bikes, he bought it, and he used to use it for herding his cattle. He'd go out in the field.
That it was the Great Escape bike?
Yeah, but it's like today. I've got a lot of film bikes in the James Bond films and all sorts of films. It doesn't mean anything. It's only in years to come.
It's the nostalgia that adds.
Yeah, it's years to come. People think, you know, it's like we've got a bike that Ryan Reynolds used in Criminal. It was just sat out in the back here. We've got Hitman's bodyguard bike. It was smashed up on a pallet. They were going to scrap it, Triumphs. And I said, don't scrap it. Now it's a really famous bike. So, you know, at the time it didn't mean much. People wanted bikes as transport. Yeah. They weren't the collectors about. So
prestige around it. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, because the film, I suppose, hadn't really done much as well. It wasn't released till 63. So, and I think when it first released, it wasn't as big as what it was when it
came out on TV and stuff.
100%.
I read this morning that the first time it was played on TV in the UK, there's 3 channels, but 25 million people watched it the first time it was on TV. Yeah. So that Christmas and all the Christmases following when it's on TV, it just builds more legend around it.
It builds more legend with the bike. So anyway, a farmer bought it and he used it for herding cattle, and the bike virtually got forgotten about. The farmer had a cowhand work for him, and he used to mainly ride the bike and go and get the cattle in from the field. It lay in an old cow shed covered up with old sacks for years and years, and what had happened was, where it was covered up with old potato sacks, the front sack had sort of got turned away, and the water had been dripping down the shed, and it had rotted this mudguard right the way through virtually, you know. Anyway, we repaired it and put a plate in, but the wheel was completely knackered. We had to put a brand new old stock rim in it and tyre. And then it was just, Ken and I were talking one day, because I've got most of Ken's ISDT bikes. And he was a very dear friend of mine, Ken. And we were just talking one day, and he said, yeah, he said, I built that bike. I said, did you? So I said, where is it now? Anyway, he sent me in the wrong direction to try and find it. It took, I don't know how many years to actually nail it down. And he rang me up one day and said, Dick, I found the bike. He said, the farmer's died. He said, I remembered afterwards the farmer's died, and he's left it to his cowhand. Here's the contact details. Anyway, we went and bought the bike, but it was in a hell of a state. The guy knew what it was, but obviously he was never going to restore it. So we bought it.
When was this?
Oh God, it's been in here. It's been in here nearly 7 years. So it's probably, well, I had the bike at home for years before we actually decided what to do with it. So it's probably 16 years ago, I suppose. Might be a bit longer. I'm not one for keeping records. Everything's in my head, and I'll probably remember. But
safe to say it was sat for 40,
many
50 years.
Oh, 100%, yeah, because the farmer had died, and then obviously the farm was sold off, and the cowhand kept it. Unfortunately, he's died now. So we've lost Tim Gibbs. He died last year. So we've lost a lot of the people that were connected with it. I think John Layton's still alive, you know. But yeah, it's sad, really, you know.
So condition-wise, then you had to do quite a bit of restoring to get into this.
We used,
pristine
because
state.
of obviously the bike itself, we used virtually 90%, perhaps a bit more, of the original parts on the bike. But obviously this was missing off it. Underneath here is a Dunlop leather saddle. That's the original saddle. As I say, we had to replace the rim and tyre. The back tyre is the original tyre, and that's as rare as the bike. That's a Dunlop Sport tyre, and they are rare. The exhausts are original, levers have been changed, grips. But yeah, most of it, and obviously the paintwork was in a hell of a state. But we had a match because obviously in places, I think it was underneath the tank, we could get the original match for the paint, which took us a long time to get it absolutely bang on. Here at the moment, it looks quite black. As soon as you take it out in the daylight, a light goes on, it completely changes, it goes green.
Pops a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll be seeing this absolute beauty being fired into life very soon. But first, I've just got a few last questions for Dick. I know you told me not to ask this question, but it's got to be one of your favourites, doesn't it? One of the favourite stories you've got, anyway.
I think the thing is, over the years, we've bought a lot of bikes from all around the world, and all of them have got a very interesting story. And when you've met the people that rode these bikes and built these bikes and everything, you can't say that you've got a special bike. They've all got a little bit of history. And one thing I used to try and do was research these bikes and their history and the riders. And when you find a rider that's done really well on a bike and you didn't even know that, that gives you a little thump in the chest.
Every bike's got history and every bike's got a story. Some bikes have a more well-known story.
They do,
but they've all got a story,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How much would something like this cost? What is a price tag on a priceless item like this, really, isn't it?
You can't put a price on it because it's valued at whatever someone would pay for it. But I can honestly say it's not for sale. Yeah. It's for everybody to enjoy. It doesn't interest me, the money, honestly. I'm more interested in someone coming here and leaving here with a smile. Yeah. That gives me a buzz. Yeah. Like today, you've come here. I can tell you the smile on your face, you're just happy being around this bike.
Sure, I got to touch it earlier.
Yeah, so, and you sat on it as well.
Yeah.
So
that leads me to my next question. We've seen you start it, we've seen you ride it, thanks for doing that on camera.
No problem at all.
What are the emotions that you have when you just ride it up and down a simple little lane like this, but what is going through your head at that time?
I think when I first rode it, I just think of Bud and Tim. You know, because I knew them both, especially Tim, we were very close. I used to, when he went back to New Zealand, I used to speak to him every sort of couple of weeks. And when he died, yeah, it's sad, you know.
This bike and the moment in that film, how much influence do you think that had on biking for that generation? Do you think it was a boom moment?
100%, 100%. It's like when they done the Wild one with Marlon Brando with the Thunderbird. Yeah. The British government were worried about showing that film in England because all of a sudden people are going to go start a motorcycle gang. Yeah. That's how much influence these bikes have. But yeah, it's just a shame Bud's not here today, and Ken, you know. They would have loved to have ridden.
But a piece of their history
100%.
is still on show.
Yeah.
Dick, thanks so much for showing us the bike and having it here for everyone to come and see. Our first task in order to get the bike fired into life today was to get it off its display and out of the factory visitors experience here at Triumph. Next, Dick obviously had to fuel the bike up, ready for a little ride, and then go through his final pre-flight checks. The helmet's going on, and we're ready for the moments of truth. So after all of these years, the Great Escape machine is still alive and still kicking. Can you imagine how cool it must feel to ride Steve McQueen's motorcycle? And for Dick, there's obviously deeper emotions connected to this machine with his personal connections to the men that made this bike famous. Is this not the coolest motorcycle in the world? Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. So we've met Dick Shepherd in this video, and what an absolute legend he is. We've seen him ride it up and down here at Triumph, and now he's let me sit on the bike, do my intro and take some pictures. This is a true honour. Steve McQueen sat in this seat. The stuntmen that launched it over the fence sat in this seat. I'm honoured right now. What a privilege. I want to take this moment to say a big thank you to Dick Shepherd and to Triumph for making this video possible. I can now say I've been up close and personal with the King of Cools machine, and I for one feel just a touch cooler because of it. So there we have it, the Great Escape bike in all its glory. It still runs, it still rides. What a privilege this has been today. As always, thank you guys for watching. This has been 999 Laser. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one and more videos on the dirt as well. Till next time, I'm Max. I'll see you at the track.